gonna talk about it. I'm gonna say, dude, I'm recording. I was like, nothing. What?
Yeah, it just stopped.
All right.
Are you gonna have anyone else with you today? Okay.
Thank heavens it's just me this time.
Okay.
Whew.
All right. Good show. How about you?
Okay. Good morning, Central Texas. Welcome to Kiss Community Connections at 103.1. I am Phyllis Jones. I am your host, and we get to have some fun this morning. A little bit of fun, I'll say. First thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about yesterday's vote. I know people are still talking about it because it's a vote that we were like waiting on. A lot of people assumed that he was going to get a slap on the wrist and say, go home, go ahead, you're a bad boy. And, in a way, I didn't think he'd get a slap on the wrist. I thought he was getting like time served or, something like that. But he got 22 and a half years. I know everybody wanted him to get life or more than that, or the 40 years he could have got. But you know what? I'll say this is a start because this was a high-profile crime. And if he would have walked away with a slap on the wrist, we would be having some riot situations going on. We know that. We know that would have happened had he got a slap on the wrist. So I'll take the 22 and a half years because that gets him off the street. When he gets out, he won't be a police officer. He's going to be older, but he's not going to be able to be a police officer ever again because he can no longer carry a firearm and all those other things that police do. So he won't be allowed to do any of that again. So I will say I'll take the 22 and a half. I take that because that case right there sets a precedence. It's telling police officers everywhere. First of all, number one, we're not the people that you think we are. And what I mean by that is we fight back. We're in a generation of times where we need to start fighting back. And we need to do it because if we don't, everybody will assume, okay, they're happy now. They're not doing anything. So you know what? We could continue acting a pure idiot. No. So I hope that all other police officers who assume that they could do what they want to do, I hope they looked at that and realized that he didn't get away. Also, when those other two officers are going to be tried next year, they keep moving their cases back and back and back because first it was this year, now it's going to be next year. But when theirs come, I hope they get the same time. Because even though they didn't do anything, what I mean is they weren't part of the body part, the holding them down or whatever like that. But they did stand there and they watched and they kept the crowd away. But my thing is they stood there. So they should get the same time he getting because they allowed it to happen. You had two of them and one officer. They could have stopped him. And they were, even though he was training them and all this other excuses, they still could have stopped him. There's no excuse for that. It was allowed to happen. And from allowing that to happen, I know what they thought. I really do. And we all know they assumed that he would get away just like he's been getting away. But guess what? Not this time. Not this time. But even though the court part is over with and he's been sentenced, we still have to fight because there's a George Floyd bill on our Congress and Senate's desks that's been sitting there and sitting there. So tomorrow or tonight, email your congressperson and your senator. Email them and say, hey, we want this brought before the floor. We want this brought up for a vote. This is what we want. You want to do that. We need to. Because you know what? If not, we're in a continuum that's going to do just that, continue. And we don't want to be in anything like that. We don't want to. We want these rules and these laws changed the way we want to. See, we can't fight and march in the street and not do anything. And what I mean by that is marching is fine. Marching is fine. It causes attention. But Don't let that march be it. Don't go home from the march and go, okay, we march. No, 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 no. Yes, do march. But when you go home, it's time for you to hit that tablet, iPad, notebook, phone, computer, whatever you use, and email them. I need this bill brought before the floor. Because we need it to be brought there. We see the brutality is still happening. And I just say it's going to stop when the bill does. But the bill will make you think. You know, you have to think, hey, listen, do I really want to go through this? Do I really want this to happen to me? You know, and most likely the answer will be no. But we need the George Floyd Act. And the only way to get it passed is us. We have to take that initiative. And we have to get it done. Okay, I'm talking enough about that. So let's move on. Let's stay on politics for a couple of seconds, a little bit. Our governor has called a special session, July the 8th. That means that all the legislators got to come back to work. Because as you know, their last day was May 31st. We're chilling. But now they got to go back to work. A special session is called when the governor has some bills out there that didn't make it. That didn't make it. Some personal little rules and laws, guidance, and things that didn't make it. And as you know, when they started to vote on SB 7 last time, that's when a lot of our Democrats left. And then the meeting couldn't continue because there was no quorum. And, you know, from there, our governor said he was not going to pay for that. He wasn't going to pay for that. That whole thing, that whole time, he wasn't going to pay for it. But guess what? You're thinking that when he said, I'm not paying for it, that it's just the legislators. No, it's 4,100 people. That's a staff of people that he is threatening not to pay. You heard me say threatening not to pay. He is. But he can't do that. Well, at least legally he can't do that. And I want you to remember, some of those kids out of college, some of those 4,100 staff people are kids who working in these offices to learn, to be mentored, to shadow them. So it will affect them. It's going to affect more people than we sit around thinking about. It shouldn't affect anybody. But this is what we've grown into. This is what we let happen. We voted for Abbott, so he's what happened. I did not vote for him, but enough people who did that he got to where he wanted to go. He got to play governor. And guess what? We keep letting him. You know, elections coming up in 2022, and, you know, it's going to be a whole bunch going on in that year. But, you know, we need to step up for change. You want change? Step up for it. You don't want any change? Stay in the back. You stay in the back, will let us know you're not ready yet. And we're glad that you do know that you're not ready yet. So I don't want anybody to do anything that you know makes us uncomfortable. But start sending your emails. You want your legislators to kill SB 7, which is the Voters' Rights Bill, which will take away sold to the polls. You know, on Sunday when the polls are open, right after the preacher gets finished, everybody who hasn't voted are going to go vote. And it's very important that we keep that. But those are some of the things that he wants to take away. You know, also what we have is your polls are open 7 to 7 for the last week of early voting. He wants to take that away, reduce that time. Reducing the time cuts off people. So we need to stand up for that. Definitely. Because that's not fair. You know, you're going to say, okay, voting is 7 to 7. Let me change it. I want it 7 to 5. No. You have too many people who cannot vote then. So we need to work on him to get that dropped. SB 7 is a bad bill, and it needs to go away. It needs to go away quickly. So what we need to do is, once again, email your congressperson, email your Senate person, and let them know what they need to do. Because remember, they work for us. we don't work for them. So remember that as you go on your way. It's not a thing. This is not we all in this together. No, you put it where it's us against you. And if it is, then we fight. If it is, then we do whatever we got to do to educate us on how we need to do it. And like I said, send an email. Those are good. They're powerful, they're good, and they keep them. But if we want some of these things to move, then guess what? We got to be the ones to do it. Because as we see, they're not being done. So we're going to move on from that. You need a pencil and paper because I'm going to give you some dates. On July 24th, you have Taste of Africa. It's going to be at the Conferences Service Center. And the first Saturday in August, we're going to have the Caribbean Afro Festival. It's going to be at Long Branch Park. Both of those are great events. They're too great for me, actually, because I only got one. There's two events, and I only got one pocket of money. So I guess I have to splurge slowly. But remember those two events, and they'll be on everybody's Facebook page, and you'll get them later. But I want to talk about July. July is something that we didn't know anything about. So, July is Minority Mental Health Month. Yes, it is. It actually is. They've been doing it since 2009. Why we just not finding out about it, I don't know. I have no clue. But it is. And we're going to do something about it in Killeen. So far, we have an event coming up. Anyway, the event is July the 16th. It's going to be at Kids University. It's going to be from 11 to 6. So put that on your calendar. But yeah, it's going to be from then. And we're going to have some groups come out and talk to us. Not groups that we see every day. So don't worry about that. You know, don't go, okay, we see these people all the time. And we don't want to see them no more. So that's not what we're going to have. It isn't at all. We're going to have some people there to talk about what mental illness is and isn't. We're going to talk about the fact that if you have mental illness, it does not mean that you're crazy and you need to run to the doctor real fast. It doesn't mean that. But let me go back and explain to you when they say Minority Mental Health Awareness Month, they're talking about blacks, indigenous people, and people of color. Now, I know I said black and people of color because people of color is a whole lot of people. But I guess they put it in there. And the indigenous, we know who they are, and we know who we are. But, we do suffer from mental illness. We all do. We all have had bouts of it. But you're going to learn more about what it is. You'll learn to walk it through. You're going to learn, what do people do when they feel it coming? What do they do? How do they do it? Also, it's going to teach us some things. And I'll give you, for instance, I used to have a coworker, and she was a manic depressant, and I didn't know. In fact, neither one of us knew. What I mean by me and the other person who had to help her, we did not know she was a manic depressant person. So one day she went into her manic depressant zone, and we got her calmed down, so we thought. But we got her calmed down. The nurse came down to see her, and the nurse recommended she goes to the hospital. Principal said, okay, because the principal we had, solve your own issues so she don't have to appear. So anyway, we took her, instead of taking her to the hospital, we took her home. She calmed herself down, and, she was much better. But, that scared me. Well, that scared our entire classroom, because all of a sudden, she's screaming and moving back and crying and hollering and laughing at the same time. Wow. But anyway, same lady. I was in one of our stores where we could buy everything at. I was in there, and it was a same lady. But she was at the store, and she was pushing people away from her. luckily, one, I knew her, and two, I knew what she was doing. So when they got a bunch of baskets and cornered her, they had called 911, but I got a bunch of baskets and I put them around her as a barrier for the people because people weren't bugging her or anything. They was trying to get her name and her name. So they were doing what they were supposed to do. But they didn't know that someone, when they're having that manic depressive mode, the best thing you can do is leave them alone. And just let it go. So that's why I put a barrier of baskets all around her so that nobody could get to her and she couldn't get out. Because those are the things you need to happen. So I formed a barrier. 911 was called, but people were standing there, so what are you going to do? Nothing. She'll come out of it. And it's true, she will come out of it. But the thing was, the more the public was, what's your name? I need your name. Lady, what's your name? Lady, who are? More they were doing that, she wasn't going to come out. She was going to still be upset because, she's dealing with herself, who's having this mode, but she's also trying to keep you away from her. So that would have continued her depression, her manic depression. It would have continued, and it would have got worse. But it didn't because, like I said, I knew what to do. How many of us know what to do? Most of us don't know what to do. Most of us would do what everybody else was doing at that time, which was asking her, what's your name? Is anybody in the store with you? Are you by yourself? Like I said, they were asking her the correct questions. But they were asking them to somebody that was in a mode where she looked at you as attacking her and not as talking her. You know what I mean? She looked at you like you were attacking her. And you weren't. Nobody was attacking her. But people were doing what they know to do. Ask you your name and all those other things. So we're going to talk about that during mental illness. We're going to talk about what people do to relax from mental illness. And we're going to talk about certain things that fell into mental illness that we don't talk about. And the reason why it's Minority Mental Health Awareness Month is because we do know there is a disparity, there's a number of, I guess I'll say, number of people, I'll say that, won't go to be treated for mental illness. And the reason they want to be treated for it because you get labeled. And some people don't want to wear that label. Some people don't want to know that I'm a manic depressive. Some people don't want to know I have PTSD. You have people who don't want to know that. They don't want nobody to know. So they keep it to themselves, and they're not going to be treated. Because, like I said, they assuming that their label's going to mess up their life. Also, with having mental illness, having a mental health problem, issue, is that we're not privy to certain things that we need when we have these issues. You see, one, if we get to a counselor, we have to go to the correct counselor. And what I mean by why did I say that? We need to go to the correct counselor that's going to actually help us and give us what we need. A lot of times, and it's opioids is what you'll be taking. A lot of doctors say they don't want to give people of color any of these because we'll abuse it. When it's been shown that we're not the ones that have been abusing some of these drugs, it isn't us, it's someone else that's been abusing these drugs. So this is what some of it says. It says African American and Hispanic Americans use mental health services about half the rate of white America in the past year. Why? Because we won't go. Asian Americans use mental health services about 1/2 of the rate of white people in America this past year. They don't go either. Let's move over. We'll say 30% of Hispanics with depression receive care versus 60% of whites. So that's 30% of Hispanics receive care for depression versus 67% of whites. That's not good at all. That isn't good at all. And in 2020, 58% of Black and African American young adults 18 to 25 they had 51. They get 51%. Wow. So it's 51% from the ages of 18 to 25. Okay, then you have adults 26 to 49 with serious mental illness did not receive any treatment at all. And only 8.6% of Asian Americans sought any type of mental health services or sought out resources. So that's nearly 18% of the generation of their general population nationwide. These numbers look terrible. So what it means is we're not going nowhere. It means we have mental illness, we're not going nowhere. But somehow our young people are. So our young people are actually going to get treatment. 50% of the 18 to 25 group, they're going to get treatment if something's wrong. So what happened? How did that happen? How did it happen that our young people are going and we're not? Our young people are actually taking it seriously and we're not. That sounded like, wow, okay, for real. I would have thought it would have been the other way around, that our young people aren't getting any care, aren't going and the older ones are. So that's in total reverse. And about PTSD, people think military can get PTSD only. No. You can have a kid who lives in a bad area. Let's say the area he lives in, gangs run that area. So he sees a lot of violence. Well, that's PTSD too, because of what he's been seeing and what he's been living by. So PTSD isn't just a military issue; it's a people issue, all the way around. So we gotta fix this area. Okay, it says Black and African American people living below poverty, as we know, are twice as likely to report services, psychological services, and they're living over, and sometimes they're being seen more. Wow. So that means that the people who we assume that are on the poverty level, we would assume they don't go, and they actually do go. I didn't know that. Men of African descent are 9 times more likely than whites to be victims of having a disorder. So, as we know, we have men who are still, I'm not going to say still being men because they've always been men, but they're not going to see anybody when they have a mental crisis. And we all know when we're having some type of mental crisis. First of all, mental crisis doesn't mean that you're crazy. Doesn't mean that, oh man, they're going to put me on medication. Nope. Sometimes it's just simply changing around some of the things that you do. Exercising, working out, going to see people. You're letting your disorder, your mental health awareness, you're letting it take over your life. So don't do that. Some of us went through a disorder last year. Last year in March, the first part of March, we could freely go where the heck we wanted to go. We could. Then spring break came. When spring break came, we heard about this thing called a virus. Okay. Then we learned it's called COVID-19. And there's no cure. And then the United States shut down. So some people who didn't know they were panicked, and they went and bought everything in the store. I mean, they bought everything in the store. It still looked like you play basketball full court in there. They overbought. Because a couple of weeks later, people pouring out milk. Why? Because they didn't drink it. Pouring out stuff. But you know what else? So that's a bit of frustration. But the part that really got a lot of people, and I know it hit me, is I had to stay in my house. So, the first time you're in your house, you clean everything. You do. You clean because you're bored. And you're waiting for this to be over. Well, after you clean so much and all this, there's nothing else left. So you sit around and you look at television, or you look at whatever you're gonna watch, your Amazon Fire Stick, the commercial, the story that's on there. What are you gonna do? So okay, after that wears off, you're still at home. So right at that point, your mental crisis begins. I know I hated my entire house. I hated the walls. I hated everything in there. I hated. You know, I did. One day I'm like, I'm staying in the bed the whole day just because I'm sick of everything else. Okay, I was having some issues. Not issues that doctor needed to resolve, but I was having some issues. But being an adult, I had the point if I can get in my vehicle and just drive. Everybody can't do that. Every child can't do that. So we need to make sure, when some of our friends are having some issues, just ask them, hey, have you went to see a counselor or anything about what's going on? If they say a negative no, all right. But if they say just a nicely say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go see someone about it. Then you've made some leeway. But don't go up to everybody and say, think you need to see somebody. Because some people aren't going to do it. But, we need to heal our community. So there's things that we need to do, something like that. If you know somebody is in a severe state of depression, talk to them. Seek some help. But don't just sit back and go, well, I tried everything I was going to do. No. We're not going to play that game. We're not going to go, I did everything I can do. No. Call someone. See if you can get them to go in. We found out this year when it was having our ice storm. A man, he went on a little tyrant rage, and the service department of the sheriff's department, he came out because that's his job. He came out and he talked to the man. He got the man in the back of his car and he took him to Metroplex and to get all the medication he needed to be better. It worked. But the next day, he got up and he was preaching louder and louder and louder, taking up the whole house, preaching outside, preaching every darn where. So the family go, he is not right. He is not in his right mind. So, okay. And they called the police. Well, actually, they called the number that the service officer left them. He left them that number. Somehow or another, they are transferred to the police department. Here comes a police officer who's not trained in mental illness. Not at all. So he sees this man standing up who has written numbers on a book of paper. So anyway, the family called the police because, like I said, he was outside again, preaching very loud, whole 9 yards. Oh boy. He would come in the house, still preaching, writing, just all over the place. Well, they called the service officer again. But like I said, they sent the police officer who isn't trained to deal with anybody with mental illness. So you know what happened? The man had his hands up and he was coming toward the police officer. The police officer shot and killed him. That's bad because the man was having a mental illness crisis. He was having a crisis, in crisis mode, and he gets shot. Just like that. So it leads us to believe that we need to get some gun control up in here, and we also need to get our police officers all trained to deal with people who have bouts of mental illness, so that it doesn't happen. Because if the man was coming to anybody else, and he's arms up in the air, just because arms in the air didn't mean that he couldn't lower them and do anything. And I'm not gonna say the cop was right or wrong about what happened, but what I will say is this. We need to sit with our cities and help them develop a crisis plan. See, our city has a crisis plan for floods. And for floods, hurricanes, fire, those are all the things that they can do. That can do. But we need to make sure that there is a plan in place. And I will tell you right now, there isn't. There's not a plan in place for either of our cities. So we need to work with the police department to plan one. But don't come in there and say I'm planning with you and you don't have nothing you bring to the table. But planning. So come in there with some answers and how we could do this. Because we don't want to know that, that case scenario to happen to a bunch of other people that it doesn't have to happen to. We don't want that to happen to anybody at all. But rarely, we don't want that to, anybody, but we don't want that to be like, okay, you have mental illness, you coming toward me, pow, I'm going to shoot you because I'm afraid. We want some of that changed. But the only way to get it changed is to sit down with the chief. We have to sit down with him and say, hey, listen, this is what we want. This is the way it should be. And here's some solutions. You heard me say that word, solutions. Give him some solutions so he can work on it. Because you know what? We have a large population of people who I'll say most likely has PTSD. But guess what? They're not going to the doctor either. They're just not. Because nobody wants to be labeled like that. No one wants that label. But you know what? Some people like the label. And I'm going to talk about the who. You have people who want to be sick all the time. They're paranoid. They want to be, they have this need to be sick. And the need to be sick comes out of the need for, one-on-one with somebody, to have a loved one or somebody you like. It's a time to catch them because you need a hug or you need this or that. But sometimes you find people who are having a meltdown or in some phase of just not getting it together mentally. You might just try giving them a hug. You might try that because a hug can do more than what we think. I think hugs have healing power because, they're ready for you. Your back is saying, hey, listen, I'm in pain. And his lower part of his body said it's in pain. Legs and feet was the only thing good. So, but mentally, no. But we need to recognize mental illness when we see it. When someone tells us that they have mental illness, we need to listen. But don't go tell everybody because it's not for everybody to know. It's for that person who trusts somebody that they want to tell that they have mental illness. And it's not something we talk about in either community. We never talk about it at all. Now, some of you who are in my age group, and I assume that person still exists. There's that family member who everybody said, hey, you just like that, just leave him alone. We used to have one of those. Just leave him alone. He all right. And later on I found out, no. He has mental illness issues. And they would just say, just leave him alone. Don't fool with him. Just leave him alone. So that was the answer to him. Leave it alone. And I'm like, okay, you got to be kidding me. But like I'm saying again, on the 16th of July at Kids University, myself and Dr. Tom Jones will be there. And we're also going to bring a couple other people. But we're going to talk about mental illness. We need to. Like I said, it affects too many people. And when it affects a lot of people, it infects us too. Very much true. But once again, I know I'm putting some more on your plate and making it heavier. But these things have to be done. And they have to be done by people who actually have a community on their side, that they know they can do this and do it effectively. So, a couple of things need to happen. First, we need to educate ourselves on what mental illness is. We need to find or define what kind of counselors you see. And we're going to talk about that on the 16th. But the mental illness thing is wild. And how did I find out that it was Minority Mental Health Awareness Month? A lady told me that 2 years, in 2020, she told me. And my first thing to her was, we got a virus that we could do. And I knew that. I knew what she was saying. And I knew that I had to schedule it too, because we couldn't let this month go by without doing anything. There's no way. When we do know that we do suffer from mental illness in a lot more ways than anyone else, when we know we are less likely to get the right cure or care that we need to have, we know we're not the ones that always succeed in that. So being that we know these things, let's take it around and let's do something with it. Let's make it promotable. What I mean by promotable, let's make this event that we're going to do so good that somebody's going to ask us to do it again next year. Although we are going to do it again next year, because, like I said, we need to take it out from under the carpet, because that's what mental health awareness is right now. You either have it or it's under your carpet. What I mean by under your carpet, you keep stuffing junk under there and just stuffing junk under there until it gets so big you got to roll over it. Well, if we're going to get rid of that, if we're going to get rid of that whole thing, we need to work together as a community. We need to come together, and we need to recognize each other. We need to pay attention to each other. We need to quit saying, hey, how you doing, and keep on walking. And then when the person tells you how they're doing, you didn't hear them. Why? Because you kept walking. We need to watch out for our, brothers keepers. And we need to listen when they talk. Because, sometimes people will talk in such a riddled sentence until you're lost. So look at that. Look at that all the way around. Like you're playing a word search game. And you'll play a game when you get to putting them all together. You'll see what they come out to be. And it comes out to be a game that you can play. Also, on the day that we have the counselors, we have our counsel session. Like I said, it's not going to be all sit down and you listen to us. The most you'll listen to me is our introductory. You'll hear Mr. Dr. Thomas Jones, because he is Dr. Thomas Jones. And we'll go straight into what we're going to be talking about and the why. Also, we're going to talk about, does this affect your teeth? And if someone says it does, then they can come, but they got to hold the animal and never let them go. I don't think they can do that. I really, but this mental illness, health month, we need to talk about it. And like I said, we need to also teach people how to relax. A lot of people stay tensed all day long, and they never get the rest that they needed because they're always tense. So they need to learn to relax, and we need to help them learn to relax. And that's fine. That's fine. But wow, I didn't know it was this huge. And there is if you're on Facebook, there is a Facebook page for Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. There's a page for that. You can look it up and see what's going on with it. And also, just talk about when it started, because a lot of people still don't know what it is. Would you believe it started in 2008? Nope. I know you wouldn't, because me either. When somebody told me that, I'm like, no, it didn't. It didn't start in 2008. But then when like I said, I got the memo from her. I'm like, I called you and you didn't answer. I said, it's a lot behind. It's a lot. So, hope to see you at the event. We're going to talk more about it as we go along, because it's not till the middle of the month. So we will be talking more and more and more about Minority Mental Health Awareness Month as we go, because I want to bring some people on who have that. And some people from the mental health awareness, sometimes mental health, it transfers over and it changes you. And what I mean by that is there are times when, let's say you get upset. You're all agitated. You are totally, totally, totally upset. You go home. First question, what's wrong? Second question, what's wrong? Third question, what's wrong? Fourth question, what's wrong? Fifth question, nothing. So when we're not getting nothing, we need to try different ways. We really do. We need to help people with mental illness and not point them out when we see them. They're people too. When you know somebody's with mental illness, do some steps to try to help them. Something. If you have, say you have flower pot outside your grass and you want to move it, she'll help you. Yeah, he or she can help you do that. Some of us ride motorcycles to chill out. Very good. That's good because it helps you. And as long as it's helping you relax and chill out, that's fine. Continue doing it. I want to thank you for listening to KISS Community Connections this morning. And I hope that we have our minds together because we're entering the month of Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. And this month we're going to have an event. So some doctors are coming down to Killeen, and an organization is supposed to be sending for their people. And they take back information. So, like I'm saying, thank you for listening to the show. I hope you have a great weekend, the rest of your weekend. And remember, we're going to talk about mental health awareness because we're going to be experts in the entire field. So I want to thank you for listening to KISS Community Connections this morning. I want you to always remember you cannot lead a positive life with a negative mind. We'll talk to you next Sunday. Bye now.